Drop below zero in some parts of the south. It's expected that the cold front could also bring more snow to cities from St. Louis to Boston. Former GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy is urging Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley to drop out of the race. In an interview with Fox News, Ramaswamy said the pair should step aside and endorse former President Trump. The comments come a day after Ramaswamy dropped out of the race after a poor showing in the Iowa caucus. DeSantis made a pit stop in South Carolina before his return to New Hampshire. Thomas Cage with the story.
Presidential candidate Ron DeSantis made an appearance at the South Carolina State House Tuesday, joining state legislative leaders for a press conference. DeSantis addressed gender transitioning procedures, Nikki Haley, and Donald Trump. He says that gender transitioning for minors is wrong and claiming that a man cannot become a woman. DeSantis also said that President Trump and former Governor Nikki Haley owe New Hampshire a debate with him before the primary later this month.
Watch me.
Dua Lipa, Billie Eilish, and Olivia Rodrigo are performing at the 2024 Grammy Awards. A Recording Academy revealed today that three of today's biggest pop stars will be treating fans with performances of their hits on February 4th. Michael Kastner, NBC News Radio.
Tahibo Tea Club's original Pure Pau D'Argo Super Tea helps build red corpuscles in the blood, which carry oxygen to our organs and cells. Our organs and cells need oxygen to regenerate themselves. The immune system needs oxygen to develop, and cancer dies in oxygen. So the tea is great for healthy people because it helps build the immune system. And it can truly be miraculous for someone fighting a potentially life-threatening disease due to an infection, diabetes, or cancer. The tea is also organic and naturally caffeine-free. A 1-pound package of tea is $49.95, which includes shipping. To order, please visit TahiboTeaClub.com. Tahibo is spelled T like Tom, A-H-E-E, B like boy, O, then continue with the word tea, and then the word club. The complete website is TahiboTeaClub.com. Or call us at 818-610-8088, Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. California time. That's 818-610-8088, TahiboTeaClub.com.
It's that time of year again. No, not the holidays. Medicare open enrollment. And if you have questions about Medicare, you should talk to the local experts. Paul Barrich and Associates. Paul and his agents are certified with plans that are accepted by most of the medical groups in our area. Call 909-793-0385. Their service is free, and after 42 years in the business, their agents are trained to help you pick the plan that's right for you.
Hi, I'm food critic Alan Borgen, and I'm excited to tell you about Ray's Shanghai Bistro in Redlands. Ray's Shanghai Bistro offers the largest and most delicious array of traditional and original Chinese dishes available in the Inland Empire. Some of my favorite dishes are the house-made pot stickers, the crisp pork spare ribs with garlic, their unique spicy lamb with bamboo, the sweet and tangy deep-fried orange peel beef, and the savory basil spicy shrimp, plus lots of vegetarian dishes. Whether you dine in, pick up the food, or have them cater your next party or special occasions, you will see why Ray's, spelled R-U-I', Shanghai Bistro, is truly the best Chinese restaurant in the Inland Empire.
Make sure to check out their new location at 405 West Stewart Avenue in Redlands, California, right across from the Sprouts grocery store. That's Ray's Shanghai Bistro. Zambrano Plumbing in Riverside would like to thank all the local men and women in our armed forces who risk their lives daily to preserve our freedom and way of life. God bless America. This reminder courtesy of Zambrano Plumbing in Riverside. They're the professionals serving the area with quality, integrity, and dependability. For service or an estimate, call Zambrano Plumbing at 909-772-9939.
This is KCAA.
Welcome to the Worker Power Hour with Randy Corrigan, a brand new show about labor and worker issues. The host of the show is Randy Corrigan, Secretary Treasurer and Principal Office and leader of Teamsters 1932, one of the largest public sector labor unions on the West Coast, representing workers in government and non-sworn law enforcement personnel. Randy Corrigan is a 30-year Teamster who first became involved in the labor movement by volunteering his time as an organizer with the Teamsters Union at the age of 21. Since then, he's helped thousands organize, mobilize, and achieve bargaining rights. He accomplished this by spending countless hours with brave men and women all over Southern California, in their living rooms, on the picket line, to bring workers towards victory. This is the Worker Power Hour. And now here's the host of the show, Randy Corrigan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Here we are, the Worker Power Hour. Longtime organizer, first-time radio host. Here we go with another hour. I got a really exciting guest at the back of the hour, the back end of the hour. Introduce him in a minute. We also have a Teamster Advantage partner that will be on here in a little bit, in about 20 minutes, 15 minutes. And, we'll do a little bit of recap of last week. But I got called out. Some people listened to my show last week and told me that I didn't call out the number because they wanted to call in. It's a true story, Frank. And Frank, make sure you put your headphones on because I'm actually going to call on you on something instead of you scrambling. The 800 number is 888-909-1050. One more time, 888-909-1050 if you want to call in. Actually, it got my chops busted a bit late last week over not calling out the number from some people on the East Coast because it's after 5 o'clock for them. And apparently they enjoy listening to it live as it's coming out and wouldn't mind calling in at some point. Don't think they'll call in today, but maybe at some point. Last week's guest, we had Megan on here from VBS. What a good conversation around the complexity of healthcare. What really stuck out to you, Frank, from last week around that discussion?
Well, I recently went through buying my own insurance because I turned 26 last year. And oh my gosh, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, you realize how difficult it is, right?
Yeah. So it was interesting to hear. It was nice to hear that you, the Teamsters, are able to get a good deal through her company, Bearish Insurance. And she just seemed really nice and down to earth, and it was interesting.
Yeah, and talking about all the different benefits, the disability, the way disability work, the supplemental disability, all the what we call ancillary benefits, voluntary benefits around the edges of healthcare. You're being able to get vision or dental, or what they call cancer coverage, or other coverages that enhance whatever healthcare benefits. And the conversation really did a pretty good job of kind of circulating around the struggles that everybody goes through when they're trying to select benefits. And a lot of times when they're doing the selection of benefits, and there's two comparisons here. The first comparison is if they're in a union, we're obviously bargaining and taking care of all that stuff for them. and a lot of times what happens is people don't pay attention to how difficult the subject is. And as you just pointed out, you get to 26, you come off of your your parents or whoever healthcare you're on, you roll onto your own, and then you're into this whole new world. We got to kind of figure out, well, what's the right plan? What's it cost? What's going to make sense? And it's a difficult subject for the average person to kind of digest, break down, and understand. And then if you guess wrong, you get hurt, you get in an accident. You get ill, you go to the hospital, or you have to go through treatment, and all of a sudden you get roll-up costs, and you get these huge bills that, in a lot of ways, end up killing people's retirement vehicles, and they end up unable to retire in the end, or they have to work a lot longer.
Yeah, and I think some people don't realize that a lot of workers are at the mercy of their employer when it comes to getting a decent health care plan. When you have a full-time job with benefits, sometimes your employer can
the employer can pick the plan. It's got to have some basic coverages, but the difference between basic coverage is kind of like with a car. If you just get the basic coverage, it's got $15,000 liability versus $300,000 or $500,000. Exactly. There's a huge difference if you get in an accident and you hit an expensive car, or somebody gets injured pretty bad. And so if you've obviously just got the basic insurance, what's required under the law, guess who's going to write the check for the difference?
Yeah, you.
That's right. And so, employer-based healthcare or group-based benefits, we did a little bit of time talking about that and explaining how important it is in our system, because clearly we have what we call the gold standard or platinum standard of making sure those benefits. We just don't want somebody that we represent to be in a difficult situation or hit a catastrophe, and then a financial catastrophe follows it because your health care was unable to cover. And so as a result, you need to make sure that, I mean, think about the challenges you face in your family if you get ill or you have to be hospitalized, or someone in your family does, or both, and then you have a financial catastrophe as a result of having to figure out how to pay the bills. That's just, it's a double whammy. You're getting hit twice.
Definitely.
On, and potentially even a third time on the situation. It's actually the number one cause, most people don't know the statistic to this, that in 401ks, which technically shouldn't be people's primary vehicle of retirement, but it is, it's actually the number one cause that 100% of their balance gets drawn down before they retire is some sort of healthcare expense, some catastrophe in the healthcare space that creates a problem that they actually have to draw their entire 401k to pay for it. That it's why? And that could be someone that's working their entire adult life. You worked hard your entire adult life, boom, you hit the wall. And so because of all the challenges that happen in the healthcare industry, and quite frankly, because big corporations and big business has tried to prevent from having to pay for it, and then you deregulated and corporatized a lot of the healthcare industry itself, not just the provider side, but then the hospital side. And as a result of all that being a kind of a for-profit base, you costs are skyrocketing and services are getting cut short. And as a result, that is all falling and landing on the working people, whether they're a small business owner or they are, somebody who's working for an employer. And again, if you leave it up to the employer, they're just going to cut the bottom line. And the last point I'll make on that subject that a lot of people pointed out to me after listening to the show was how people take for granted two things. One, if they think they have health care benefits and not quite know the full totality of it until they hit some sort of emergency. And then the other is if they do have great healthcare benefits, kind of taking it for granted, right? So you almost get two sides of the coin of that situation. And I think it was a real robust conversation, clearly attached to a Teamster Advantage partner in the area with insurance, voluntary benefits. It was just a pretty good show, well-rounded when it came to, connecting the dots with our community. And so with that, I'll move on to everybody. Again, I get a lot of feedback on this one. Members and friends and everybody really like to hear what the Teamster jobs are that they didn't know before. And this week, I'm going to point out three of them that are kind of, I wouldn't say obvious, but they're people that we deal with a lot. We just don't realize that they're Teamsters. San Bernardino School District. So not San Bernardino County Schools. So there's a school district that's called San Bernardino County School District. That entire school district, all the clerical and admin, they're all Teamsters. My local actually represents them. And so attendance issues, enrollment issues, all the issues that are handled within the inner office of the district itself, they're Teamsters, and they make sure and manage that the school district is operating and moving in a positive direction every single day. With that is LA Unified School District. Actually, all your support staff, your cafeteria staff, your maintenance staff, those are all Teamsters as well with Local 572 in Los Angeles. They're actually based in Carson. And ironically, man, it was like 26 or 27 years ago. I actually worked on that organizing drive to help them become Teamsters all those years ago. I worked with that local back when I was a little younger. And I was just over to help them from my local, which is out 63. And so we're proud to say that we also represent school district employees and making sure that our kids have, grow up with a great education. And I think it's important, for us to make sure that we recognize the direct relationships that we can develop with these schools and making sure that the kids coming from junior high and high school understand how moving into the workforce once you graduate, how quickly that comes upon us, right? I think we can all think back to when we were that age. And, we're working really hard to build those bridges and those transitions so kids move into really good jobs if they're not going to go to college. 82% of the kids in the Inland Empire do not go to college. A statistic, they do not go to college after they graduate high school. And so the fact is, it's nothing wrong with that. There's been an overemphasis. Not the overemphasis. I think that it's been wrong to tell people they're a failure if they don't go to college. I just personally think it's wrong to say that, to make a generation. My whole generation and the generation behind me and the generation in front of me were basically told if we didn't go to college, we were a failure. And that's just not true, because there's a lot of good jobs out there that need to be done. They should be good middle-class jobs, and you're not a failure if you don't go to college. Sometimes, school's just not cut out for everybody. Some of the hardest working people I know, never went to college. Matter of fact, some of the most educated people I know, it's hard to get them to go to work. So, sometimes the smarter we are, the more we talk ourselves out of actually doing some work.
I was one of the people that got the impression that I had to go to college, and I went, and I wasn't ready for it. It wasn't the right time for me to be in college, and now I have no degree, but I still have $11,000 in student loans. So,
boy, yeah.
If it's not for everybody, there's no problem with going to college, obviously. But if you don't want to go to college, there are plenty of opportunities out there outside of college. And there's trade schools as well that you can do, and you can be self-taught in something, and you can make a good life for yourself.
Yeah, so that's exactly why we're having this discussion. Is it's okay to be a middle class worker. It's actually what makes our economy move. Again, so those are good Teamster jobs. The next one is closely related to schools, but it's Gold Star Foods, represented by Local 63. They actually deliver all the food to most of the schools in Southern California and Northern California, specifically LAUSD, a number of the school districts around here. So all of your free lunch program or your lunch or any of the lunch in which any of our kids are getting at school is more than likely delivered by Gold Star Foods. The drivers are Teamsters. The warehouse personnel are all Teamsters. And so a good shout out to them. They make sure that our kids eat. And matter of fact, during the pandemic, during COVID, the shutdowns, all of those workers kept working and made sure that food was still going to the schools, because remember, in a lot of these economically depressed areas, that's the best meal of the day that a lot of these kids are getting. And those schools were still serving lunch, and it was because Teamsters were delivering the food to make sure that those underprivileged kids were going to be able to get their food, their nutrition for the day. And so shout out to them. We really appreciate them. And here's a nice little one, the next one, the last one. John Denier Cheesecakes. It's a great cheesecake. It's everyone loves it. They're pretty popular. More popular, I think, in the LA basin than they are out here in the IE, but they're 100% union made, and their Teamsters are the ones that make sure that their machines operate properly, make sure that they're running properly, and make sure that those cakes have all the right ingredients in them, and make sure that they're going to obviously get to the bakers. The bakers are union too with the Bakers Union, and I just learned this the other day. Again, shout out to Carlos Gonzalez for lining these up for me every week. He does a little bit of research and tries to make it fun and mix it up for us. So I really appreciate that. And so let's move on to some current labor news. I'll kind of try to rip through that real quick. 3 hot topics going on right now. Starbucks and the Supreme Court. Starbucks is appealing a decision to the Supreme Court. Starbucks did some illegal activity and were told by a federal judge that they needed to reinstate workers. And Starbucks is actually doing something that has not been done in a very long time, and that is taking an NLRB decision, a regional body it's a government agency that has ruled that Starbucks did something unfairly and needed to reinstate these workers, and the union had to go to federal court to enforce the decision made by the NLRB, and Starbucks is snubbing their nose at it and saying, no, we're going to go to the Supreme Court and try to override the decision. It's what they call a preemption issue, and that the issue has been decided literally thousands of times since 1935, 1934 when the Wagner Act was put into law. It was 1934, and then in 1935 it changed to the National Labor Relations Act. Anyway, that labor law enforcement agency clearly is taking a position that, hey, look, you need to reinstate these workers for what you did and what you shouldn't have done. And, you know, Starbucks is really going out on a limb here, and I think that, you know, they really need to think about it. You know, obviously when you're paying $4, $5, $6 for a cup of coffee, I mean, this is high-end stuff. This isn't just a regular cup of coffee. And, you know, this is a luxury item, and clearly a luxury item. And, you know, to be treating workers this way and to hoping that the Supreme Court, now, I will be honest, I will be upfront with you. The Supreme Court has not been very friendly to labor. This new Supreme Court has been real tough on labor, on unions, and it's not appreciated, I can tell you, by a lot of people. But, you know, at the end of the day, they're going to make the decision, and that's Starbucks shopping, hoping that they can go to another authority to not actually do the right thing. And the dispute, you know, is over, you know, their conduct, and their argument is so weird. Their argument is in this space of trying to say that because the regions, which the regions are the authority over a particular geographical area, because you can't have one place in Washington D.C. that does all the decisions and all the cases, that the decisions are inconsistent across all the regions, and they have some differences to them. Well, of course they're going to have differences because all the cases are slightly different. And so the reason is to really just try to drag it up to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court has not decided to take the case. A lot of times in this space, the Supreme Court will reject it and say, no, you already have an authority that's made the decision. And hopefully the Supreme Court does the right thing in this one and just says, no, you need to follow what the NLRB has decided and also what the U.S. District Court had told the company to implement. And so clearly, you know, hundreds of locations have organized at Starbucks. You know, you have over 370 of them that have organized out of almost 10,000 Starbucks stores. And, you know, these workers, you know, clearly a luxury item. You know, they're not making a lot of money. Somebody's making a ton of cash on this. It's about benefits. It's about working conditions. And, hey, if you're paying $4 or $5 for a Starbucks, you know, you can afford to pay some of these workers a little bit better. I get it. If you're selling 50-cent coffee, it may be a whole different story. But, man, when it's got this sort of price tag on it. Now, I will remind you that most of the Starbucks product that's being delivered is actually delivered by Teamsters, too. At least specifically in Southern California, Martin Breyer actually makes a delivery. So we've got our connections here and there. It's kind of interesting. The next story I want to talk about is Tesla. We talked a little bit about Tesla last week. I'm going to raise it up again here. They are actually bumping up their pay for all their factory workers. Well, of course they are, because of what happened with the UAW contract. You know, everybody followed the UAW contract. The union workers got a raise, and this part of the news goes into what I talk about over and over again, is that unions are helping raise standards in the middle class, even people we don't represent. And it happens anytime we negotiate a really, really good contract on a large scale. All the non-union competition starts to what they call do the union bump, and they bump up the wages a bit to try to keep somewhat comparable, because if they don't, then those workers are going to say, well, I guess I need a union. Now, the reality is even if you had equal wages, you actually need one, especially with these large corporations, because, you know, you get eaten up and spit out in these tough situations. And so, you know, Tesla has raised their wages. They've announced to everybody, ironically, we're going to do it through 2024. You know, shockingly, you know, right after the big national fight that happened in 2023 around these workers. So, good shout out to them. Glad they got a few more bucks in their pocket, but ultimately they need to organize, get some great health care, and make sure that not all the money goes into Mr. Musk's pocket, and to where he can. I mean, I guess he hasn't flown himself to the moon or anything yet, but I think at some point I think he's the one to go to Mars. That's what it is. He's going to one-up Bezos, because, you know, Bezos did the whole, I'm going to go up into space and fly around a little bit, and then one will go to the moon, and the next one will go to Mars, and, you know, it's amazing to have that much money to be able to do stuff like that. The last point I want to make on the news is in New York. New York had actually passed a law to raise the minimum wage for app delivery workers, and what they saw was they did it. There was a big study done in the state that showed that a lot of these delivery workers were making as low as $4.03 an hour, and that's just unacceptable. And what ends up happening there is a safety issue. Is they start to hurry up, they start to speed, they start to increase, start to cut corners of safety in an attempt to try to raise their wages because you're delivering, you're on the road, and the faster you can get from point A to point B, the more money you're going to make. And clearly with Uber and a lot of these Uber Eats and that style of industry, when you see the time, you see how much you're going to pay. You say I got to go from point A to point B. You know how much you're going to get, how much it's going to cost before you start the trip. Well, the flip side of that problem is maybe that's good for the consumer, but we're not just a society that should be just a consumer-based issue. It should also be a worker-based discussion too. And the flip side of that is if you have a preset time and that time shortchanges the driver, then the driver doesn't have a choice but to try to cut corners. And so there has to be some protections put in there to try to prevent workers from losing. And so they just passed this law in New York, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But obviously the intent is to get it to where they operate more safely. And, the delivery apps, the delivery company's response has been quite puzzling. They obviously change things around and move things around to make it more confusing in their apps, adding new fees and trying to pass it on versus, again, a bunch of wealthy people trying to figure out a better way to share the wealth. And so with that, I'd like to transition into our guest, our Teamster Advantage guest. We have Mary Reuter. She has a specialty market in Yucaipa. I think she's been on other shows here at KCAA.
Yes, I have.
And before I transfer over, one more time, I want to say 888-909-1050. And so, Mary, why don't you introduce yourself? We've got a few minutes before the break, and why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what kind of small business you have and your partnership with Teamster Advantage.
Okay. Well, I own Soaring Swine Acres Emporium, which is a brick and mortar shop in Yucaipa on California Street.
I live in Yucaipa.
So do I. In fact, my husband's family has been in Yucaipa since the 1930s.
Oh, nice.
So we are my husband's family, longtime residents, and Yucaipa is a wonderful place to live and have a business. About 13 years ago, I started a small business to give my son a job who had dropped out of college. Mm-hmm. And at the time when all the job markets had kind of dried up and he couldn't find a job. So I said, okay, I'm going to start this business, and that way he'll have something to do. So poor thing, I did not pay him union wages. He had a roof over his head and food.
That's better than union wages, I'll tell you right now.
But we make all natural jams, jellies, sauces, salsas, and pickles. We started out with just jams and jellies and sauces and salsas. And then I learned how to make pickles, and we added pickles. For a while, we had our own honeys, but now I contract with another honey vendor that's local from Mentone. We have also, in the past 2 years, created another line of products called Voodoo Queen Tea, and they're called Voodoo Queen because I am originally from New Orleans. We make all-natural herbal teas and tinctures that are actually health remedies. In the past 3 months, we have started another line called Southern Sisters Wellness with my sister in New Orleans, and we make products for people who have pain, anxiety, stress, that kind of issue.
I need to visit you because I have all those things.
We've got something that can help you, whether it's a tea, a tincture, or a salve. So my son started us with this, and now he's got a great job, and he's doing fine, and he works overtime. So he doesn't help me as much as he used to. But we have a great business. I got involved with Teamster Advantage about a year ago when Mark Orr came and spoke to the Yucaipa Chamber of Commerce. He talked about the Teamster Advantage, And my eyes just lit up. And I said, I want to be involved in that. And so as soon as the meeting was over, I sought him out. And I said, okay, what do I have to do to join that? And it was very simple application process. And I absolutely love it. And I appreciate what Teamsters Advantage does for small businesses.
And how much do we charge you?
Oh, let's see. What is it? 0.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, we appreciate your small business. And, you know, it's one of the things we're going to talk about on the other side of the hour is small business owners and labor and workers, you know, have so much in common. But sometimes we feel divided by what's going on in our current society. But, you know, clearly we appreciate the partnership and, you know, giving our members a discount for shopping there, and obviously us encouraging our members to shop local versus pushing the little buttons on their app-based phone, which usually goes to a big corporation.
Yes, exactly. And small mom and pop kind of businesses need that kind of support from their communities and also from Teamsters.
Yes.
So we absolutely love it. Y'all provide publicity for us. You offer vending events.
Yes, we do.
That don't cost me a thing. So I will be there. I think it's on April
13th, our car show. All right.
At the car show
good.
with my products.
Yes. Yeah, we'd love for our Teamster Advantage partners to attend the car show. We don't charge for the space. It's all about sense of community and just getting everybody to connect.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And I love that about it. So when Teamsters come into my business and show their card, they get a discount on our products.
Well, thank you very much, Mary. We really appreciate that. I got a little long-winded on our news, so I'm sorry for cutting you a little bit short here. But is there anything else you want to say before we transition over to break?
Just come on in and check us out at 12116A California Street in Yucaipa. We're open Tuesdays through Saturdays from 11:30 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. And we will be happy to give you free samples and show that Teamster card.
All right. You get a discount. Yucaipa, California. I like to call it Yucaipa. It's Yucaipa, California. Yeah, it's a nice little town. We appreciate the work you do in the community and appreciate you coming on the show.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we can encourage more, not just the Teamsters, but if you're a Teamster and you're part of the Teamster Advantage Network, you actually get a discount. If you're not, always make sure you support your local small businesses because it really keeps the economy rolling in our local in our neighborhoods and in our local community. And so with that, I think we got to transition to a break here, right? Am I rolling over? So with that, it's the Worker Power Hour with Randy Corrigan. We will see you on the other side of the hour.
It's a bird!
It's a plane!
No, it's Super Roth!
Okay, a gimmicky opening for a commercial about Super Roth Universal Life Insurance, but I'm sure it got your attention. Now, what is a Super Roth, you ask? It's a permanent indexed universal life insurance that's totally liquid and easily accessible once it matures. Can be used to supplement retirement savings or a death benefit, or both. Has no income or contribution limit. Has no 5-year rule like Roth IRAs. Has no 10% penalty for accessing the funds before age 59 and a half. Oh, and the average historical returns are 5 to 7% annually, tax-free. Super Roths also lock in gains, which means you don't lose your money when the market is down. Sounds incredible, right? Sounds super? Super Roths are the way of the future, specifically your future. To see if you qualify for a Super Roth, go online to thesuperroth.com.
Zambrano Plumbing in Riverside would like to thank all the local men and women in our armed forces who risk their lives daily to preserve our freedom and way of life. God bless America. This reminder courtesy of Zambrano Plumbing in Riverside. They're the professionals serving the area with quality, integrity, and dependability. For service or an estimate, call Zambrano Plumbing at 909-772-9939. Southwestern Motors in San Bernardino thanks our troops and veterans for everything they've done so fearlessly for us. Send letters and packages from home and offer a veteran a discount on your local product or service. It will be greatly appreciated. This message courtesy of Southwestern Motors at 791 North Mount Vernon in San Bernardino. Known for quality, integrity, and knowledgeable service since 1957. Call 909-889-9539. Southwestern Motor, on the air because they care.
Welcome back to the Worker Power Hour. This is Randy Corrigan, longtime organizer, first-time radio host. 888-909-1050 if you want to call in toll free. This is KCAA 1050 AM, 106.5 FM. Joining me on this side of the break is Dennis Reardon. He has been a long-time labor advocate. There he is on my screen in front of me. I love this guy. He understands the history of labor, understands the history in general. Very, very intelligent individual. Has been very helpful to me for a very long period of time. Whenever I'm in a pinch, there's two guys I usually call. One is Brother Kamek, and the other is Brother Reardon here. And we're kicking around an idea for a show, and Reardon helped me kind of pencil some of this stuff out, and I just thought it was a fabulous idea. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to have to break this show up over a series of shows because it's just too big of a subject to try to tackle it in one show or one segment. And it is why the U.S. worker, why the American worker doesn't have its own labor party. And what I don't want to do is to get into the politically divisive subjects. I try to keep that completely out of my show because there's just no space for it anymore, especially as destructive as the parties have kind of been here recently. But clearly what's happened is the American worker has been kind of left out of this discussion and in a lot of ways feels abandoned and a void in a connection to their parties. And I guess, without stealing all the thunder of the discussion, I'd like for you, Dennis, to kind of introduce yourself quickly and go through a little bit of history as to how long you've been connected to the American worker, including yourself being one. And thank you for your service for serving our military.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you? It's good to hear you, brother.
It's always good to hear you too, Brother Reardon.
So, so as just quick background, grew up in a union family. Dad was the president of a bill posters and billers union back in Denver in the 40s and early 50s. So I got my introduction there, served in the Air Force right out of high school. Thank God for the GI Bill that GIs during that time were able to benefit from, and so I had a chance to go to college when I got out of the Air Force. During that time, while I went to school, I had 2 children and was married and had the benefit of the GI Bill. Went to school, night school, weekends. Was able to get a degree and that really qualified me for my first position during that time. I was an air traffic controller. I worked for the Federal Aviation Administration.
You crazy guy, you controlled the airplanes?
Imagine. Well, everything, life is an illusion. You and I both understand that. But they said we controlled them. But I had the opportunity to come into a new organization. PATCO was just formed in 68. I came in 70, just after the first strike. And so I was, elected to local office as a union local leader, became the president of a local in St. Louis, Missouri. Went to graduate school after my undergraduate while I was a controller. And PATCO strike occurred in 1981. I was on the PATCO staff at the time. I was involved in the contract negotiations, et cetera. Unfortunately, as we all know, the Reagan administration fired approximately 12,000 workers, and I was on the staff. I'd left the FAA employment by that time. And then I went on and worked with a couple of other federal sector unions and subsequently stayed in union business as an adult and retired in 2009, having worked for about 14 years for the teachers union in Ohio.
Yeah, you were the executive director of the teachers union in the state of Ohio, correct?
I was the Ohio Education.
You're underestimating your resume here. He's got quite the the titles that he's held over time, and quite the experience too. So we appreciate you sharing that. And so let's just talk briefly about this question of, why is it that the American worker today, Dennis, feels as if they've been abandoned by both parties? And, we can give examples. You just gave an example of how Reagan abandoned, I know a lot of Republicans. I'm a former Republican myself, that Reagan abandoned the workers when he did what he did. We don't need to get into the details of that. It's well documented as to how unions were shocked at what he did during that strike. But let's answer that question first, because I think with our limited time today, and as we will break this up over the next over some shows in the future, is I think that why is it that workers feel abandoned at this point, in your opinion?
Yeah, clearly there is there's designed inequality in the system. I mean, basically, the United States has a huge culture, long established. It changes very slowly, like a ship moving in the ocean, very slowly. And, the dominant force is capitalism. I don't consider capitalism a dirty word. It is it's the structure by which our economy principally is structured. And, there are owners. I mean, there are some basic principles to capitalism: owners and workers. And,
but they don't own everything. Right.
Pardon me?
They don't own everything.
They don't own everything.
Correct.
And over time, unions have been able to, help the worker establish more equity in the system. And that really was what you were talking about earlier with Frank, I think, about healthcare. Over time, changes are made, but they come through really a fight for equality. And I think that's where the American worker is now, and
they feel it's not equal anymore, huh? They feel they can feel that especially when you see corporate profits at a level in which it is, and the amount of wealth that's shifted in this incredible way. You could a lot of ways take that wealth, of one individual CEO, and just cut it in half, and they're still a billionaire. They're still a multi-billionaire, and then give the other half back to workers. And the amount of money that recirculates through our economy when that happens, obviously you can't do it like that. It's just an example. But it's like, no, they keep taking, and it's where capitalism starts to run awry, right? It's where
it really does.
It goes too far. And I agree with you. Capitalism is what we've got. It's part of our republic. There's nothing wrong with it as long as those that own these businesses do the right thing. The problem is sometimes they can't do that. And so how workers feel as if they're being abandoned. Let's talk some historical data. You pointed out some things. I think it'd be important if you could run through that real quickly. It's the timeline over the last 100 and some years as to how a worker party never really got its footing, and just kind of briefly why it didn't get its footing.
I was intrigued, Randy, with Mary. What a grand personality. But in the conversation, you highlighted the fact that in years past, farmers, particularly, given the structure, the agricultural economy was so strong in the 1800s, that labor and agricultural farmers principally formed joint organizations. They pursued similar goals. They understood that the small farmer and the worker really had something in common, and that was a bigger fight against this larger structured economy that's out there. And there were farmer labor, actually groups called Labor-Farmer Democratic Organization. And again, that wasn't a party. It was focused on the concept of democracy back in the 1830s, 1840s. You had, I think it was working men's parties have over time with various names have been designed in an attempt to bring the forces of workers together with larger groups outside of the working class. And over time, they've been crushed, basically. And today, we have dominantly, it's really in our, it's in our culture, two principal parties. And, I think over time, given all the machinations of politics and a lot of the forces of money in politics, what you have is the working man once more ends up being at the bottom of that
priority list. Yeah, bottom of the priority list. Yep.
Really are.
Yeah, and so they feel abandoned right now. Workers over the last couple decades, you hear corporate America have a tendency to try to smash on what they call regulation, and then all of a sudden there's this narrative that you got to get rid of regulation, you got to get rid of this, you got to get rid of that, and a lot of people just don't realize that most of those regulatory factors were put in place to protect workers, because we started out our country with no regulation and you could own your workers. In other words, that was called slavery. That clearly wasn't a good beginning, and that persisted for nearly 100 years. Then the Civil War erupted, which started over slavery, the North and the South, and other political issues, but primarily over that issue. But it was really about owning labor and this discussion, right? So now it transitions after the Civil War, and now labor is so-called free, and free from the chains and free from being owned by somebody. And now they're in what they call the workforce, and it's how are you going to survive in that? And the industrialists and these massive owners of property had so much money that it was really hard for people to survive in that space. And so as time has gone on, workers in the workforce has constantly tried to push forward, while corporate America says, no, we don't want rules. We don't want rules. We don't want rules. As a matter of fact, corporate America has fought every holiday to be passed in America, and yet they benefit from it on holiday sales, right? They benefit from Christmas, and they benefit from all these holidays, but yet commerce has consistently pressed to try to oppose that regulation or that rule that they're obligated to have. And unfortunately, the narrative, we got to deregulate things. Well, whenever you hear that, you should always think about that if you hear the word deregulation, there's usually an equal sign next to it, and workers are somehow losing if regulations are being pulled back. Not 100% of the time, but close to 100% of the time. So those regulatory factors, as you just pointed out, were put in place because of those early fights that farmers and workers got together and said, hey, wait a minute here. We need to have a say-so in this space. And they kind of developed their worker power, and they created sort of energy in that space and started to get some rules created. But in a lot of senses, it still hasn't completely caught up for workers, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that they've not had their own individual voice.
Randy, one of the issues the gig worker. I mean, at the fact that people are having to work 2, 3, 4, and 5 jobs. I thought my father, as the president of a bill posters local in Denver, Colorado, when he worked 2 jobs, I thought, man, that just seemed so unreasonable as a kid and as a young man. And now we have people who have basically nothing, no health insurance. Their children are faced with growing up in a world where
parents aren't home.
The opportunities I had 70 years ago. And you mentioned the political parties, and I want to just touch on that. I think one of the reasons is that clearly there have been a lot of promises at every election. I am a member of a political party, but I also understand that we need to be honest with each other. We don't get enough support. We, being the working man, does not get enough support out of the political system. And somehow that has to change. And clearly, the challenges and the complexity of trying to form a political party for workers in the U.S. clearly it's highly complex, highly difficult. But we need to recognize that north of us in Canada, Canadians, we have 2 different systems. We have 2 different cultures. We have 2 different histories. But they were able to put together a party under Workers' Party under different conditions, clearly. but bright minds can do a lot of things. So I respect people who are focused on this idea of creating a political party that can begin to help workers equalize and bring workers together. We're a disparate group. We have many conflicting issues. Over time, those issues can be worked through by effective leadership. So I think the idea is worthy of a good conversation.
It sure is, and I think it goes a bit deeper. What I've learned, I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. In a leadership role, you meet with these elected officials, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, and you talk about the issues that are obviously close to workers, and you ask what their position is. And one of the things that always blows my mind is they're being, most of them, they actually think they're doing something that is for the worker in some cases. And I've had to tell them, like I had a mayor a couple years ago that I got sideways with at a lunch when they tried to tell me, well, I did A, B, and C. And I went, you never even talked to the expert in the field, and that is us. We have been doing this for over 100 years. You never picked up the phone and asked us that question. You depended on industry experts that have been around for a very short period of time they are not experts of that industry. Right. We are experts of that industry. And you think that you're doing something on behalf of the worker. Clearly, I ended up having to pay for lunch that day. Actually, I always do when I meet with a political figure, by the way. But, it ended rough because, and it's a mayor from the area, by the way, from the Inland Empire. It ended rough because the ignorance of what the worker actually needed, they thought they understood and they thought they were doing something in that space. That's how disconnected the parties have become on the subject. And again, I've seen on both sides, both the D's and the R's, equally missed the mark, thinking that they were doing something for the worker, and they completely missed the mark. Look, as much as we took a shot at Reagan, I got to take a shot at the Clintons, right? Passing NAFTA, right? All the free trade stuff like that. Unions were screaming at them going, don't you do this stuff, and obviously a lot of the Republicans got on board with it as well. It wasn't just Clinton that did it, but it was Clinton that opened the final door to make that happen on trade. And so you can go with the D's and the R's, and you can go all the way back, and you can show how they've completely missed the mark. And later shows, I really would like to get into fundamentally, just kind of tease out what structurally we would need to do to have that to do that. But we got to first have the conversation like we're having right now, right? Like, why is it that it's not happening? And answer the question is to, would it help workers? In your mind, with your vast experience, would it help workers that they just basically had their own party? And when I say workers, I'm not just saying labor union workers. I'm saying workers in general, including small business owners. I just had one sitting right next to me. Like what political parties try to do is divide our interests sometimes to get us worked up over other things. Like one I'll share as an example, immigration. You want to fix immigration? There's one simple thing you do. Me and one of my staff members were having this deal the other day. Find the employer an incredible amount of money for doing it. Not only can you generate revenue to keep within the tax base, but you find those employers for breaking the law. Guess what's going to happen? The illegal immigration is going to stop. And some of us in labor have been saying that for a very long time. And you could have policy that's responsible for it, but it seems as if they don't even want to fix it because they want to exploit that labor in a lot of their businesses. And so again, the D's and the R's absolutely have missed the mark on this. And do you think it would help workers, Dennis, with your experience?
I will tell you my bias, Randy. I just need to be honest about it. It's going to be very difficult given our society and our culture and the history that has marked the creation. But I think for me, the question I would answer probably more directly is political action is absolutely essential. It's critical to the future of workers as a population, as a group, and their common interests. It is absolutely essential. We have political action and we have calls for get out the vote and that. somehow, it seems to me that the American worker needs to somehow we need to bring them together in a way that focuses on and understands the importance of political action. You mentioned that you have some education employees in the San Bernardino School District. And I was out in your local at some time during that organizing campaigns. Helping that group, which I will say you guys within Local 1932 did, understand how linked their jobs are to the political decisions in certainly in the county, certainly at the school building, and certainly in the state. And then the state funding, the federal funding beyond that. And somehow we need to bring, the labor movement needs to bring to people a clear clarification and an understanding of
their
why
role.
it's essential they get involved in that, in those political activities, and then engage them in that.
Yeah, and it's not about the wedge issues. It's about working
Correct.
issues. And I'll give you an example here locally. I took a ton of heat supporting a Republican for the Board of Supervisors over a labor candidate, which was Kurt Hagman. I supported him. We supported him. Our PAC committee and everybody supported him and made sure that he had won. And I internally within the unions, I took a lot of heat because I was like, wait a minute, he has absolutely been supportive of labor. He's been supportive of our policies with the county. We represent the workers of the county. This is a Republican. And it's, historically it's like, oh, you're not going to support that. It's actually not true. We support Democrats and Republicans. What matters is, do they support workers? And,
That's right. Vote your interest. You're basically saying vote your interest.
And make your interest not just a consumer-based interest, but actually a worker-based interest.
Absolutely.
And that your consumer-based interest should be secondary to your worker-based interest. And making sure that understanding, what the levers are that get pulled in these systems is a lot of work. Now, I really appreciate you coming on, Dennis. I know we just kind of barely scratched the surface and kind of teased this subject. I'm really curious. I'm going to reach out to everybody and start to kind of try to hear, all right, what do you guys think about this? Because we're not going to get into politically divisive subjects. What we want to do is get into fundamental discussion on, like, how would workers benefit from this sort of process? And I've just got 2 minutes before I got to wrap up, but I don't know if you want to say anything briefly in closing. But Dennis, we really appreciate you coming on the show. You have been a tremendous help to me professionally over a long period of time. You're a good friend of mine. I know it's cold in Ohio, and hopefully you're keeping yourself warm. We appreciate you joining us by Zoom. Is there anything you want to close on?
I would just say, Randy, I appreciate it so much, the opportunity. I love you, you know that, and you're one hell of a leader. I would suggest that, we talk over time, if this conversation continues. We also talk about how is the U.S. different than Europe, a number of countries in Europe, and certainly in Canada, Australia. They have labor unions focused on workers who form a labor political party. And I think it's important for people to understand, some of the nuances without getting too deep in the weeds, but why the conversation is so important.
Thank you, Dennis. Really appreciate you coming on. We got 1 minute left. I want to wrap up the show with the question that we'd like to ask. First of all, thank you for joining us on the Worker Power Hour. This is Randy Corrigan. What can you do to build worker power? Talk with your family. Talk with a friend. Talk with a neighbor. Explain what worker power is. Worker power is helping decide that direction collectively as a group. Longtime organizer, first-time radio show host. Randy Corrigan here, signing off.